It's mid-afternoon in Kiev. Here's what you need to know. More than 1,300 anti-war demonstrators have been arrested across Russia following President Vladimir Putin's announcement of a partial mobilization Wednesday, according to OVD-Info, an independent protest monitoring group. Some detainees have been directly conscripted into the Russian military, OVD-Info spokeswoman Maria Kuznetsova told CNN. Meanwhile, the UK government has confirmed the release of 5 British nationals who were freed alongside 2 US veterans, as more details of the Ukraine-Russia prisoner swap emerge. Here are the latest headlines. Prisoner swap: the UK government confirmed that 5 British nationals have been released as part of the prisoner swap between the Ukraine and Russia. Brokered by Saudi Arabia, the deal also saw nationals from the United States, Morocco, Sweden, and Croatia leave detention by Russian-backed forces. More than half of anti-war demonstrators are women. Over 1,300 anti-war protesters were detained in Russia Wednesday, according to the independent monitoring group OVD-Info. The watchdog said 51% of the publicly named detainees were women, with 9 journalists and 33 minors also among those held. Partial mobilization still a special military operation, Kremlin insists. The protests followed President Vladimir Putin's announcement of a partial mobilization, with Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov insisting Russia's actions in Ukraine remain a special military operation as opposed to a war. Kremlin denies reports of people crowding airports to leave Russia. Flight sales websites and Google Trends have indicated a spike in people seeking to fly out of Russia following the partial mobilization announcement. On Thursday, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov called reports of citizens crowding airports to leave the country an exaggeration and fake news. International officials voice fears over Ukrainian nuclear facilities. Foreign ministers and senior officials from Europe, North America, and South Korea expressed grave concern regarding threats to the safety of Ukrainian nuclear facilities. In a joint statement, the officials criticized Russia for their seizure of Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, as well as their sham referenda.